Got a couple posts here from um, a Michael Grange article and a Zach Lowe interview. So I'll start with the Zach Lowe interview. Um, Actually, not an interview; it's his podcast, saying that there's a lot of scuttlebutt or a lot of Pascal Siakam scuttlebutt going on right now. I'm not sure there's anything imminent, but I don't think that scuttlebutt is going anywhere in relation to the Hawks and other teams. I don't think he'll gamble on making All NBA again. It feels precarious to me. Um, there's some added details at the bottom, but it's not really all that important to what we're going to talk about today. And then the second part is from Michael Grange. And Michael Grange says, it's been an uncomfortable stretch for the two-time All-NBA selection. He turned down a 3-year max extension at the beginning of the season in the hopes that he would qualify for his third All-NBA team and thus become eligible for the Supermax extension worth 35% of the salary cap. But ultimately, he fell short. Yada yada yada. In the meantime, has left. He will go da 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 da. It mentions Rico Hines and Earl Watson not being on the coaching staff anymore. Those are two guys he was pretty close to. You have to wonder how the delay in getting an extension done, the two sides have yet to meet formally on the subject, is sitting with Siakam, or how he would feel if a career best season wasn't enough to earn one, or an offer for the full 4 years at 183 million that he would be eligible for. So the main thing I want to talk about here is the fact that Pascal Siakam turned down a contract extension last year, basically betting on himself, which is probably something he learned from Fred VanVleet. But yeah, basically betting on himself that he would earn an All NBA nod, and that would allow him to get a supermax. So with that not happening, he's in a position now where he has another year where he could potentially make the bet again. So um, what that means is essentially if he drops off this year and his value gets tanked, he's not going to be a max player in the eyes of NBA teams. But if he bets on himself and he does get that All NBA nod, he'll be super max eligible from the Raptors. What Zach Lowe mentioned is that, or what he speculated, I guess, was that Pascal Siakam probably wouldn't do that this year. And then I'm not sure if Grange, he didn't speculate along those lines, but he did mention that the Raptors haven't met yet. So that's something that was echoed amongst both media members. So where I'm at with all this is, I think we have to really get into why these teams haven't met yet. And when I think about it, I can only think of two possible reasons. Because the what we've heard on Pascal Siakam's side is that he's turning down trades to other teams because he can't guarantee them that he'll sign an extension. And he's also mentioned that he wants to, or not, he's not mentioned, but it's gotten out that he wants to be in Toronto long term. So it seems like everything on his end is pretty simple. He wants to sign and he wants to be in Toronto. He wants to sign a max deal. So on the Raptors end, you have to look at that angle and try to figure out why have they not got it done yet. I can only come up with two reasons, and that's why I've said it's a pretty simple thing from that side. The two reasons I think you don't give Pascal Siakam a max extension as of July 5th, 2023, is because you think that there's still potential to get a deal done. And obviously, you want the contract negotiations to be for the other team. And also, if you extend Pascal Siakam, he's untradeable, right? So the whole idea is that you want to preserve his trade candidacy, and that's why you don't give him the max. Or you don't give him the max because you don't think he's worth it. Now, that might be financially in terms of the money per year or the length of the contract. Either way, you don't you don't enter negotiations with Pascal Siakam if you're not there in terms of what you want to offer him. So say that all to say, there's only two reasons from the Raptors side that they haven't given him an extension yet. So now you have to look at Pascal's side again. How should he react to this? How should he react to the fact that the Raptors are either entertaining the idea of trading him around the time that he's made clear that he wants to be in Toronto, or they're not all the way sold on paying him during a time where he had a better season than Fred VanVleet by miles, but Fred VanVleet got a max in the NBA. Um, I forget if Chris Middleton's contract was a max or not, but it was fairly big. I've seen, based on what I've seen get spent over the last 2 years in free agency, Pascal Siakam is clearly a max player. So, from Pascal Siakam's standpoint, regardless of what the Raptors' reasoning is for not being at the negotiation table, it reflects poorly on it reflects poorly on Toronto when it comes to his assessment of where they're at. So, what do you think Pascal Siakam is going to do if he hits free agency come this time next year? Do you think he's going to have that same goodwill? We've seen Fred VanVleet leave the Raptors and mention in his goodbye post that, hey, I went from nobody knew me to the most loved to the most hated. Not to say that that's why he left, but this is a player that was pretty cognizant of how he was treated and how people felt about him in Toronto, not particular to the Raptors, but particular to the fans. So if Siakam feels a similar kind of lack of love from the Toronto management, how is he supposed to react? How do you think this is going to make him feel? How do you think this is going to weigh on his head when he's talking to other teams and other teams are making it clear what they're willing to offer him? So I think this is the talking point that I don't think is focused on at all when talking about Pascal Siakam. And I think Michael Grange didn't. He's probably not in a position to say it in clear terms, but he's kind of alluded to it at the end here. You have to wonder how the delay in getting an extension done is sitting with Siakam. And then he mentioned in the middle of that sentence, the two sides have yet to meet formally on the subject. So we're essentially delaying the process of meeting with Pascal for this extension. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar, Kawhi Leonard left San Antonio due to a bad relationship, and that was a product of quite a bit of instances of not seeing eye to eye. But one of the prominent beat writers in San Antonio wrote an article when Kawhi left, basically detailing how the relationship broke down. And the start of the relationship breaking down, according to that article, was that the Spurs delayed the process of giving him a max extension. So they could have gave it to him the year before he hit free agency. They decided to not do that, have him wait a year, and then gave him the max extension afterwards. Now, of course, people are different, situations are different. These aren't like the same thing isn't going to result in the same reaction in every situation. But you do have to kind of keep that in mind that NBA players, for right or wrong, they have pretty they think of themselves very highly. They think of their situations very carefully, and if they feel like they're not necessarily being appreciated in situations where they're giving it their all, you can't necessarily say that that won't have a negative impact on their standpoint. So I've rambled on quite a bit about the different kinds of factors that should be looked at with regards to Pascal Siakam and his contract extension. I have a guest with me. I'd like to welcome to the stream Kenyon. He's from Basketball Rewind, as it's shown on the screen. That's the channel that Kenyon works on. If you haven't checked that channel out, you definitely should. He does great work. You guys need to go run his numbers up. But yeah, welcome to the stream.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah. No issues this time. We're all sorted out.
Okay, and how does my voice sound? I know sometimes StreamYard makes my voice sound like Daffy Duck or something.
Oh no, you sound solid. You sound solid.
Okay, that's
The
good.
mic's working well.
Awesome. Yeah. So what? I missed part of the first portion of your
Okay,
stream.
you got it.
So I know you. It
Quick
looks like
run
you're
through.
going over the story.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah, give a quick run through.
I'm going over a specific part of this Grange story and
Mm,
then this little tidbit from the low post. But basically, the point being that in this post that I don't think he'll gamble on making All NBA again. It feels precarious to me with regards to Pascal Siakam not wanting to wait before getting a deal done the way he did last offseason. And then in this post, some of the general points about the fact that he made that bet last year. He didn't want to sign a deal. He turned a 3-year max down because he wanted to bet on himself, potentially make an All NBA team. Didn't do that. So now he's in a situation where Grange is kind of alleging that he's also not going to want to make that bet, and he's more open minded to getting that extension done, but the Raptors haven't met him. So what I'm kind of trying to introduce as a talking point in the whole Pascal Siakam situation about trading him or not is, why has he not gotten a max deal from Toronto's end? And I could only kind of come up with two possible reasons. You either don't max him because once you max him, you can't trade him until I think it's like a couple months. But the point is that rules out trading him this offseason. So you want to keep that possibility open so you're not maxing him, or you don't see him as valuable. That's the only other possible reason. So keeping those two things in mind, how would Pascal Siakam react to that, right? And how could that potentially impact his view, how he views Toronto and how he views the idea of staying here long term, especially that this is all happening allegedly in an offseason where he made clear that he wants to stay in Toronto. And Kenyon, before you start, I just want to introduce Nico to the stream. We'll get to him afterwards, but go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kenyon.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things to kind of parse out there. Um, in terms of the extension, I want to just clarify. So, are you talking about why he hasn't got? Why didn't he agree to an extension? Because you kind of already outlined that. In terms of why he didn't agree to an extension last year, or are you talking about currently?
No, currently, I guess not saying why hasn't he agreed to it, but why hasn't it happened yet, right? Because what people are
Mhm.
alleging is that it should, on his end, he wants to stay in Toronto, and he's not gonna take the gamble of going for the supermax again. So from his end, it seems pretty simple. Hey, max me out in Toronto, right? So
Yep.
I think his end seems pretty simple. And the fact that it hasn't happened is more of a reflection on where Toronto's at. And
Well,
that's more,
I'll,
yeah,
I'll
go ahead.
say this: you're missing a key part of this story. He can't legally sign a contract until the 7th.
July 7th? Oh, the end of the moratorium, right? So the thing is does that same thing apply to Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards? And like, are they also waiting for the moratorium?
I don't know Tyrese Halliburton's like contract. I know it's like 2 years after your first year or whatever, or when
Yeah,
the date that you first signed the contract, blah blah blah. It's
right.
that kind of thing. So I don't know Halliburton's date per se, but like I guess what I'm trying to say is that like he legally couldn't.
Right.
So I'm not really that worried. I think the other thing with this front office is we know that they tend to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
If anything, the coaching search is a good example of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I don't think it's always fair to players that they do that and wait till the last minute, but they do tend to like do that. They tend to operate in silence a lot of times. So anything that, I was speaking to someone who was on my channel often, uh, named Beyond, and I, the way that he put it is, you have a better chance of a Toronto reporter breaking wind than a story ever. There has never been a time when any sort of and this is not me throwing shade at Grange. It's just he has never ever broken any story in the Raptors' time during his entire career covering this organization.
Right.
So to me, I look at guys like Stein, Windy, Lowe, the guys who are actually plugged in, and all of them are
Right.
saying like, yeah, Atlanta's, I mean, they like if the season started today, Atlanta is worse because swapping John Collins for Rudy Gay and a giant trade exception does not make you better.
Yep.
Like they're worse, but at the same and they're also desperate and they also want to make moves and they also have 19 people on their roster, so they're kind of trying to do some sort of consolidation. I don't know if they have the juice to get this done. um from that standpoint, I know that's kind of jumping ahead, but yeah, I do think that like I've said this for a while. I think that Pascal Siakam will probably get a max extension. I said this year, I'm like, I don't know if he's a lock for all NBA, and this was people were debating about this around December, and I was like, I don't think it's a lock. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to get a certain seating with the team as is. I think we're actually a better team this year than we were last year, 1 through 10 in the rotation. maybe not through like your top 5, um, but that's okay. And in fact, that's better because that means that you're not grinding your top 10 into dust.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I feel like I've talked a lot, and I could go on for a bit more, but I don't know if you want to introduce Nico.
We can get to Nico, if you're there, feel free to chime in. But yeah, one thing I'd say is that regarding the July 7th thing, that is a good point. That once when the moratorium is lifted, that introduces the possibility for it to happen. What I'd say is that I think that that's the case with a lot of these deals, but like they get announced in the beforehand anyways, and then they get officially get put through. And yeah,
Right.
I look at it with yeah, well, like in particular this case, not that that Grange would be tapped in on people's intentions, but I think the fact that there is a bit of an overlap between two sources that I think would come from Siakam is more like what I'm looking at, because the way I look at the Raptors front office,
Hmm.
nothing gets out, right? And I think the draft night is such a perfect example of that, because I remember watching the draft and I'm on Twitter, and Shams is getting every pick 2 picks in advance, and Chris Haynes is getting the occasional pick and ahead. And then it gets to Toronto, and it's radio silence. There is nothing on Twitter, nothing online. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, I guess we're trading out of this pick. And then Adam Silver walks to the stage, and we heard about that pick for the first time from Adam Silver's mouth. And I was like, this feels like a miracle. This doesn't happen in the modern NBA. But that goes to show where Toronto's at. So
Even
particular
with
to like,
extensions, right? Like
oh
we
yeah,
don't really announce that kind of
even
stuff. Like,
Darko, even Darko, not a soul knew about Darko. And then, so this is where, like, yesterday when I was looking at the media reports about Portland and OG and Atlanta and Pascal, I'm talking about Portland sources and Atlanta sources. I frankly don't care about what's coming from Toronto's side, because I don't
mhm.
think it has any value. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because that's real. You can't look at uh reports that are seemingly coming from the Raptors front office and take it seriously. So when it comes to this situation, I'm more looking at, that's why I'm thinking you have to like logically put together where Toronto might be. You can think that Pascal's agent would get something out, right? That's where you could think that, okay, if we're going to get something out of the media reliable regarding this, it would come from Pascal's agent. So when I hear two sources kind of putting out the same thing of, yeah, Pascal's probably not inclined to make the bet on himself for the Supermax again, I'm thinking, okay, that either is well sourced speculation, or that's his agent putting that out to kind of just stoke the flames in the media. So and that's where like my whole thing is that is less about what is being reported about Toronto and more putting two and two together about where Toronto might be at, and then consequently where that would leave Siakam going forward. But like you said, obviously, like even if there was an agreement right now, they can't put pen to paper, and it would be Toronto like to like, hey, there's no point in putting this out before it happens, because that's their style, right? They didn't put the Darko rumors out or the Grady Dick interest out and then had it happen later. They just did it. Like once it's done,
Yeah.
you'll hear about it. So with that in mind, yeah, it does make sense of like we might not hear it until July 7th when it just happens. There's no build up to it. It just happens.
Yeah, and I think, there's I'm not saying that there's not real interest in Siakam, but based on the moves that they've made, I mean, I had Samson Folk on my show actually, and we talked about like this is pre-free agency.
Yeah.
We talked about the idea of Yak, really, really briefly, and he made a good point. It's like, you've sold Yak twice now on not basically rebuilding, right?
Yeah.
You sold him a bad bill of goods when he first arrived, after he came from the gulag of San
Yeah.
Antonio, and
Yep.
he's like, I'm done with this. Like, I finally, like, one of his first things is he said, I'm finally in a winning organization. I mean, to be fair, he won more here than he did in San Antonio, but at
Of
the
course.
same time, it's like they didn't make the playoffs; they made a
Yeah.
play in.
Yep.
And then what did you hear hours before he signed the contract? Right? He wanted to be in a winning situation. He did not want to re-sign with a rebuild. So this business is a relationship driven business, If you're
Yep.
gonna sell like again to a player and agree and say, hey, you're going to have, we're not going into a rebuild. And then you
Yeah.
look at Atlanta's package, which, if it was even done now, wouldn't include Kobe Buffkin even. And
Yeah.
you go down the line, and there's other issues here. I don't see someone who could replace someone who is going to most likely be perennially all NBA for the next 2 years at least.
Yeah.
In terms of Siakam, I'll just in and the all NBA stuff, I'll compare him to Sabonis. Sabonis made all NBA this year. I don't
Yeah.
know if he would make all NBA either. He just signed a contract, right? So
Yeah.
I think these are things to put together. But yeah, like if I look at the Atlanta package without me even going into the whole OG side of things, um, I just think it's very difficult. Not to mention that you would be. Let me put it another way. What's the best package in your opinion that Atlanta could potentially send you?
So I saw yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but the Jake Fisher interview on an Atlanta podcast basically saying that there would be two ways of doing this. It's
Hmm.
either uh DeJounte Murray and less assets or DeAndre Hunter and more assets. So as far as what those assets are, it's not Kobe Buffkin, we know that. But I think he mentioned Jalen Johnson is a better bet than AJ Griffin, which I don't love the sounds of. But if
Right.
we're dealing with like Jalen Johnson and future firsts, the Jalen Johnson and future first parts aren't so compelling just because I think either with the future firsts, you're getting them while that team has Trey Young and Pascal Siakam. So you're talking about picks in the 20s,
They
late
don't even
20s.
have control of their own picks. This is the other thing too. They have
Right.
Sacramento's pick for this year, which is supposedly not supposed to be the best draft. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is that they have the San Antonio pick in 2 years. That's appealing, but because of the Stepien rule, they can't trade that pick
Right. Um, is the stepping rule the back to back picks rule? Right.
without
So
sending them a pick back. And I'm not saying them Pascal and a pick. Now we're talking crazy.
no, thank you. No, thank you. With the logjam of I guess draft pick commitments there, you're now talking about draft picks 4 or 5 years down the road, which I have no interest in. I'm no thank you. So yeah, like that isn't compelling. And I also looked at with DeJounte Murray and DeAndre Hunter. DeJounte Murray is somebody who is on an expiring deal, I believe. Like you're gonna have to pay him next summer. So that's a player that I think he would be well primed to have a good season and demand serious money. So kind of calling back to something I've talked about in a video prior to free agency is like we're not in
Mhm.
the best position to just be paying guys with where we're at. Like we kind of do need to get value for our money with regards to the talent that or like the production we're getting for the money we're spending. And as much as I like DeJounte Murray, if let's say we're paying him 35 million a year, like that's fair from his side. But I don't love that for Toronto's side personally. So
Yeah, I mean,
that
the other thing too is that if you just cleared out, whether on purpose or not, you cleared out possessions that will now need to go places like to OG, who
yep,
by all stretch of the imagination has wanted more possessions, and then you're
yep,
taking in another guy who is not familiar with your system. Oh no, I guess it's a new system either way, but who is on a contract year, who you don't
yep,
have the same familiarity with as the guy that you're shipping out who wants to be here. How
yep,
do you know that he's going to give his touches up to OG? And then the final point that I'll make, I I really like DeJounte Murray. I think he's a very dynamic guard. Has projected to be a two-way player, although the defense took a step back this year. Could be because of his running mate. But
yep,
with that being said, it's always concerning. And I'll give you two small points about this. Number one, when a team trades an all-star guard when they're
yep,
23 years old and still under
yep,
contract. I've never
right,
seen that before. I get it. The whole Wemby thing. Guess what? OKC sat Shea, so they could have done the same thing. And the people who godfathered or authored the load management stuff with Tim Duncan was that team. The second thing is that right after getting him, and then guess what? Quinn Snyder, his old coach or his old assistant coach, comes in, and they're still thinking about getting rid of him. And so that's two teams in under a year essentially, or a year and a half, that is a little bit concerning. I don't know if that concerns you. And that kind of when people say I want Christian Wood on this team and stuff like that, you always get a little bit concerned, even though the talent is there.
Oh, I agree. I think that there's one of those things where if people are moving you. There's a reason behind it. In San Antonio's case, they moved him for pretty good value in terms of draft pick compensation. But that being said, they could, like I think you mentioned, they could easily tank games while having Dejounte on the roster. And if you think you have a great point guard and you're positioning yourself for Wemby, that makes perfect sense to look at your next 10 years with your
An
point guard of the
an
future and Wemby.
all-star.
Yes. Yep.
He was an all-star that year and they traded him.
In the West. So that's a compelling point. And like I said, like these kind of credentials, being an all-star at a young age, right? Having certain kinds of production, these necessitate getting paid, right? And it just as a team that would have to pay him, that's not the best situation for us. And the other side of it was DeAndre Hunter, who is, I think, his this year an extension starts that's fairly, like, it's priced at, I think, around 4 years, 90 million, which isn't so bad. But the thing with DeAndre Hunter is the guy misses games and his skill set's a little bit redundant for what we have, considering that, like, I think that us trying to just stack the roster with redundant skill sets is kind of blew up in our face last year. So we should be pivoting from that. So along both lines, not a huge fan. Kenny, did you see the comment in the chat? Do you have time to get to that?
I did just see that. I mean, it's possible, but I think it's tough. I've always liked Lou Dort, by the way, but I think it's tough
Same.
because they might actually like him. If there's somehow a way to get Case and Wallace and Lou Dort, I don't know. With
We would have to match salary. We would have to match salary, right? Case and Wallace, as an unsigned draft prospect, carries no salary. So
yeah, Lou Dort
they,
is close. I think it's like 14 or 15
we
million.
can check that out right now.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, because I know he signed a deal. I think it's actually it's close to 16, so it actually might work. I don't know
I'll
if they
try
would
to
do
get
that
that
though.
on
So,
screen.
um, but yeah, I'll fill up the dead air. I'll basically say this: Kobe Buffkin, if he's not part of the deal, then I'm not. And AJ Griffin's not part of the deal. Then, as much as Jalen Johnson is interesting, that's not enough value for Siakam, given the deals that we were just talking about a couple weeks ago.
Right.
Like you're going from potentially getting Scoot and
Mhm.
Simons, and I'm not a big Simons fan, but Scoot and Simons to, well, you might get AJ Griffin, or not even AJ Griffin, like
No,
you might get
yeah.
Jalen Johnson.
You might get the other guy
I
there.
Yeah, I actually think OG might fit them better as a trade partner because they have the $25 million trade exception.
This is OKC?
No,
Sorry,
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the bid, that's from the John Collins deal?
It would be, yeah. So that hasn't been finalized yet, but if it goes through, then yes, they would at least get a trade exception.
Yeah.
And to me, OG fits under that, and so you could take back a couple rookies, take back your Kobe Buffkin, take back the other guy, because I'm also looking in the future of what is OG going to cost you next year,
Yep.
given his almost exact counterpart just got paid $160 million over 5 years.
Oh yeah, for sure. That I think you're looking at that as a minimum. I think the Jeremy Grant deal is a minimum,
Mm-hmm.
presuming he has like a season, you like, just a season that you can envision him having next year. If it's catastrophically bad or like amazingly good, that changes. But the anticipated season that he's going to have next year leads to him getting paid more. Um, and if you don't think that's the case, I mean, I think the fact that he wants the ball more directly lines up with wanting to be paid more. Like there's a correlation there in what you want for yourself. You want the ball more, you want an opportunity to show off a higher valued skill set, and that's essentially what getting paid is probably an end goal in doing that, amongst other things. So
I think you
um
lost someone.
yeah, no. So I think Nico was never really there. So if
Oh,
he
okay.
if he if he comes back,
Gotcha.
we'll have him. But to quickly get back to the OKC situation, looking at their cap sheet, right? Not only is Lou Dort a salary that's like in the ballpark of OG, it's basically the only
Yeah, I
one
was
because
close.
Davis Bertans, yeah, Davis Bertans is I'll zoom in a little bit more so it's more visible.
Yeah, it's
Davis
a yeah.
Bertans is a bad contract, right? That's not actually even something that we would want back. And Chet Holmgren is probably untradeable for them, as is Shea. So you're gonna have
Hmm.
to like. There's literally no two ways of meeting the deal other than Oladipo and Patty Mills, like basically expiring dead money or Lou. So one of
I
two things would
mean,
have to happen.
Davis. Okay, so I really hate throwing out um trade frameworks like this randomly because I usually
Yeah,
do not do this. So people, please do not kill me too much. But depending on what you are looking to get back from an OG deal, if it's basically Bertans, you toss in someone else because you'd have to balance the roster with Bertans coming in.
yeah.
It's OG, you get Case and Wallace and future picks because they have 34 picks in the next 7 years.
They keep pushing them back. Look at the Denver Nuggets deal that they just did. They have literally their picks are burning a hole in their pocket.
By the way, I did hear rumors from our favorite team, the Spurs, that we were trying to trade the pick, our pick for four, asking for four first this draft. So we that could have happened.
Wait, from who? From San Antonio, or was this a general ask? From San Antonio.
Yeah.
That
So
is
apparently,
egregious.
we're not
Oh
done
man.
dealing with our favorite team.
Of
Um,
course. So no, just real quick there, because I
mhm,
think that's interesting. Because I believe OKC traded 3 firsts for Usman
mhm.
Dieng last year in
Yep.
the draft. So it's interesting that the Raptors felt that they could one up that because I think Usman Dieng was drafted in that range too, like early teens
Yes.
ish.
And Atlanta
So
got offered a similar package for their 15th pick, not from us, but yeah. So,
yeah,
um,
that's interesting though. But in the case of San Antonio, right, you'd still think that for the next couple years their picks would be valuable though. So
yeah.
that's a little bit rich. That's a little
Yes.
bit rich.
Watch it would have been our pick coming back.
Of course, of course. Oh, I put that in the trade primer thing. That's one of the better assets we could get back in a deal is our pick back.
Yeah, and I agree with the person. Yeah, that I won't say it's my issue with OG, but it's like the second that Fred's out, you know that you're gonna get a lot more shots. We haven't played in Darko system,
Yeah.
and yet immediately a couple hours later, it's like OG, a report about OG wanting like more ball handling responsibilities and stuff like that comes out from CAA, I should say. Um, And to me, that's concerning. I don't know if you've dug into the numbers or done film study on OG's isolation possessions. Um,
I've heard some stats. I've seen some stats floating around of just the efficiency being very low.
yeah, so someone tried to sell me on, well, without Pascal and it's okay. This is gonna sound like I hate the dude, and I'm trying to kill him. I'm really not. I like OG people, I really do.
It's
Um,
okay. Long form content, lots of time to contextualize what you're gonna say. So make
yes.
sure you get to
Um,
preface it how you want to.
so I'll put it this way really quickly. You look at the times when Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet were gone. It was just the two guys, right?
Yeah.
OG and Scotty. Which, by the way, OG is going to be 26 soon, so he's not as young as people are making out to sound. He's going to be 26 on the 19th of this month. So, with that being said, he scored, I think, 22 points. I can't remember the amount of rebounds. It wasn't a lot of assists. Okay. You look into the efficiency of that 46 points, or sorry, 46-ish% from the field. This is just off the head, right?
Yeah.
And I believe it was around 25% from three.
Yeah.
That's not great numbers. The person was trying to sell me and say that he was doing all-star numbers, and then you dig into the efficiency, and that is not all-star numbers.
Right.
The other challenge is that you go back to games like against Detroit, and it's like the first Detroit game, November the 14th. You can go look at the box score if you score if you really want to. Do you remember who won us that game? It's very early in the season.
Oh, Delano Banton? Was that the 27 points from Delano Banton?
It was
Yes. How could
32,
I forget?
actually.
Oh, it was
32.
32.
He
Oh my
balled
goodness.
out. I think he
It was
shot
G
9
League Delano.
of 16. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, no, I think that was G League Delano showed up that day, right? That was a
Yes.
Raptors 905 performance.
And I'm actually going to just look up the box score on Basketball Reference myself. But because I looked this up earlier. Sorry, let me just look this up.
Go ahead. Go
OG
ahead.
off the top of my head, without me looking up, and I'll confirm in just a second. He shot. If you were to guess that game, what he shot from the field, or how many how many possessions did he take from that field, from that game, I should say.
Ooh, what, like 18 maybe?
19. Very good.
Okay, yeah.
So
It sounds about right.
yes. So sorry, 1 second. Detroit. I think this is the Detroit game right here. So I am just on Basketball Reference. I'm pulling it up. I'm getting his numbers. He shot sorry, it's just weird because it gives me the advanced box score numbers first, and that's not what I'm looking for. His field goal percentage was 31.6% from the field. He shot 1 of 6 for just over 16% from 3. These are not the numbers. I know it's harsh, but these are not number one numbers. These are not Mikal Bridges numbers. With higher possessions, his defense will also go down. OG is a phenomenal player in the right role. I don't know if he wants that right role.
I think he definitely doesn't. And I think so here's the thing, right? A lot of what you said, my thought process is along those lines. I've heard some of the other talking points that people have brought up who maybe feel differently. So, like in the case of OG, I've heard a lot in terms of games where he's had that opportunity to be the first or second option. Is he's had the opportunity to do it with basically like a supporting cast that wasn't worth respecting. So you're talking about the logical conclusion for the other team being second defender to OG, because who cares about Delano Banton at the 3-point line, which, one time maybe that was the wrong strategy, but most times it's the right strategy, right? So,
Okay.
and I think from OG's standpoint, that's probably where he's at, of give me a fair chance. Like, give me a chance to do it in a situation where there's a functional second, third, fourth, fifth option on the court with me, and you might see something different. And his persistence to get this opportunity makes me feel like he definitely looks inward and sees, um, a person that has the capability but hasn't had the right opportunity arise yet. And I think the thing you can't argue at all is the fact that what's happened thus far isn't representative of somebody who like deserves the opportunity in the context of a team that's looking to win right now. And not necessarily win in the context of contention, but win as in just like we're trying to win basketball games. That's important to us. It's hard for a person with that resume in this role to then look and say, hey, no, give me a chance. So that's a difficult spot for him. And I think that's part of the reason why he's meeting with agents and he's telling them, look, I want the opportunity. I want to go the Jeremy Grant route of turning down 3 years, 60 million from Denver to get 3 years, 60 million into Detroit, right? He seems like he's going down that route. Obviously, different contract figures. Our guy Giovanni here says OG is eyeing likely 35 to 43 million a year for 4 years in the new CBA.
Well, yeah, I have it pegged at 37.5 ish is my guess. But to your point, if OG is going to be like, and I agree with you. I agree with everything that you're saying, and I think that he should want more for himself. But the numbers don't lie. And usually in a smaller role, you need to show that you can excel and be efficient. They've given him touches early on in seasons. They've given him opportunity. If you track the amount of drives and stuff like that, he has had opportunities
when
to
other guys
showcase
get
his
hurt.
talents.
Yeah. Yeah.
When other guys get hurt, or even early on in seasons, you'll see it, and it's not really efficient enough. So, you look at his turnover numbers. He has one of the worst turnover percentages on drives in the league. Right? He's 7th percentile. I mean, again, it sounds like I hate the guy, right? And I don't. But I'm just saying, like, he's 7th percentile for isolation stats. And then it's like, okay, let's trade Pascal Siakam, turn the keys over to Scotty, and then give OG the second, the second thing. Which, by the way, we're gonna also bring in Dejounte Murray, who's probably gonna, supersede OG. So then he's
And
unhappy
everybody's
again.
gonna try to get to the rim on the same possession. It's gonna be beautiful.
Right. And Dejounte Murray, by the way, is not the best 3-point shooter anyways.
Of
So
course.
he
Yep.
shoots
Yep.
basically 1% more than Pascal Siakam.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's interesting. Like, we would basically have Dennis Schroeder and then Super Saiyan Dennis Schroeder and DeJounte Murray, like, if you wanted to put it that way.
Yeah.
Like, we're just all in on the redundancy.
Yeah. It's like, so again, my whole
My
thing is that,
goodness.
like,
He moves and ball handles like an ogre. Giovanni always has a way
I
with
mean,
words.
I'm not going
If
there.
I'm sure
Uh,
people, I don't know if everybody reads the comments on my videos like I do, probably not, but Giovanni leaves like really long, wet, and detailed comments on a lot of my
mhm.
videos. And like for my Dame video, like he was speaking about leverage and he went on to describing like leverage in the context of nuclear wars and how people settle nuclear debates. Like Giovanni is always on one when it comes to commentary. I definitely appreciate that. But yes, back to OG.
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's and it's great. And Giovanni, thank you so much for commenting. And by the way, I'll as a
Yeah.
side note, I've seen you shoot up like 25 subscribers. It's great to see.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's really cool. This consistent content stuff works. Who would have thought?
Yes, it does. It does. I mean, I don't do streams. I'm only, I'm here, just joining yours. But I agree. The consistency is key, and once you reach a certain point, it's onward and upwards. Back to OG. Yeah. So like, again, if OG is willing to try it out in this offense and that sort of thing, I could see them doing it. Where I think that the front office will probably likely land with this type of thing is they will probably give Pascal Siakam an extension because, frankly, this is a worse draft. They already traded their draft pick, so if you're gonna tank, just convey the pick now. Just get rid of it. If he's on an extension, guess what? He's worth more at the deadline if that's the direction that you want to go, and
Yep.
it's really not working. I would then Now, if they really wanted to get creative, and I don't really know if this front office likes to get creative and proactive in that manner, they might want to um, renegotiate OG's current contract with them and extend them, kind of like how they did with Miles Turner. I think that would be an interesting way so that it's like, okay, now we'll pay you around the 32 range, but we're giving you a boost this year. After we've, like I said, I don't think I can get minutes for both Boucher and Precious. So you're probably going to have to trade one of them away. Boucher makes sense. You save some money there. You're under the tax line. You give them a
Yep.
raise. Everyone's happy. Everyone holds hands. Everyone goes away. But so that's what I would do. But if that's not something that he's interested in, whoever doesn't sign a contract with me or an extension with me, then I would start looking at other directions, to be honest.
I agree. I think it has to be that way because from an asset standpoint, we don't have enough assets to be casual about our assets. We have to get the most out of what we have. So we have to think that way. I'm gonna, I guess, move on to the next topic. But before we do that, just a quick bit of information from our league source, Giovanni, who says OG is gonna be traded to the Thunder for Dort, Case and Walson, future first. So for the people watching, you heard it here first. Toronto Hoop Talk, breaking news. This is gonna happen. So welcome to Toronto, Lou Dort, Case and Wallace, and the 17-year-old that's gonna be the future first. But yeah, we'll close that out.